In past visits, Chris Sargent from the United Way of the Battle Creek and Kalamazoo region was introduced as Chief Operating Officer and then interim CEO and President. Today we dropped the interim in the introduction. President, CEO, United Way of the Battle Creek and Kalamazoo region. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Richard.
Congratulations on the new job.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Sort of new. I mean, you've been doing it for a little while.
Yeah, just a few months. Yeah, about 8 months. And so, but really excited and thankful and quite honestly honored and privileged to be leading such a great organization with great leadership before and great leadership as an entire team now.
Mm-hmm. And your role with the United Way has been focused in Battle Creek before the combination of efforts between United Way and Battle Creek and Kalamazoo.
Yeah, so actually I've been with the organization in some capacity now for almost 13 years. And so, the president and CEO here in Battle Creek just prior to the merger, which actually just celebrated 5 years.
Has it been that long
this
already?
week? Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. Time flies when you're having fun.
Sure does.
And so just been a part of the great things that we've been doing and now get a chance to continue and accelerate those.
Mm-hmm. When you look back on those 5 years, and this whole merge idea was one that was at a business model from the National United Way, or was this something that you took part in locally and said, we would do better together?
It was purely a local decision. Mm-hmm. I mean, the nice thing about United Way is we do have a global brand, largest private charity in the world. At the same time, all of our decisions are made locally by a local board of local representatives. And so the merger decision, actually, we started the conversations 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. Took 3 years to kind of work through what would be best for the entire region, how would each community individually benefit from coming together. And so that was our focus all along, that we thought we could be greater and better together for each of our communities in each of the areas and then together as a full region.
Have you been able to see that come to fruition now?
Absolutely. And the reason being is, I know we've used this term before, this phrase before, hunger doesn't stop at the county line. None of our social issues stop, on an arbitrary geographic boundary. The children and families, the vulnerable people that we serve every day, live, work, and play across the region. Our donors, our volunteers, our companies think and act that way. And so now we're able to talk about a stronger message of impacting thousands of people across the region, but doing it location by location, community by community. And so each community, we do some things a little bit differently, but together we're having a greater impact around the 4 goals of education, income, health, and basic needs.
So when you're in an interim post, I presume, I've never been in such a post, but I presume sure, just as an outsider looking in, that when you're in an interim post, you sort of have a basic list of things that you're maintaining while you're in that post. And then when they take the interim away, you're a little freer to say, okay, I have a vision for these things, right? Is that true?
Well, it can be. In my case, just because I was part of the leadership of the organization, it was more a continuation of the vision, goals, and outcomes that we were trying to achieve over the last 8 months as interim. Now that I'm, the permanent leader, somebody asked me the same question the other day. They said, so what does it feel like? And I'm like, well, it doesn't feel that much different other than I'm focused on acceleration now. Mm-hmm. I'm focused on doing more, doing better. My leadership model is creating a supportive kind of leadership culture where everybody's a leader. So not one individual, provides the sole direction and decision making, but that everybody in the organization, we have a staff of, 30 plus folks. We have a great board of 23 individuals. We have multiple committees with hundreds of volunteers. Every one of them plays a critical role in the leadership, vision, and direction of the organization. And so, my role is really to be a coach, a mentor, a support, someone with key vision and setting clear expectations. But in simple terms, it's a little different, and it's a little bit more, okay, now we've got long-term plans that we're putting into place. But those are a continuation of the 10 and 15-year goals that we have set in each of our areas.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about it before, the notion that in prior years, there was a lot of focus on the bottom line number in the campaign, and now the focus has changed to more of a honing in on the results of that number.
Yeah.
How do you see that going forward now? Is there more of that you see happening? What's the vision?
Definitely more. And the reason being is because all of our partners, 71 organizations that we invest in, 130 programs, all have key common metrics to report back to us on in the goal areas of education, income, health, and basic needs. And actually, that's coming due next week for the annual. We are very much focused on the product of the outcomes and the impact that we're having on children and families in the community, and the ability to say to our donors financially, our donors who give us time as volunteers, this is the impact that we're having. This is what we can continue to do together. And I think that's the message, in particular for my leadership is it's all of us working together. It's about engaging all of us together, because it's not going to be 10 of us. It's not going to be 100 of us that are going to make this impact that we're trying to have in the community, in the region. It's going to be thousands of us.
Mm-hmm. We just spent 2 days on the roof of the Haven and $60,000 raised, just, $10,000 beyond the goal. And we look at what United Way is doing too. And, one of the things that impresses me is we may have been in a frame of mind that suggested we can try and eradicate some of these social issues. But as I spend more time close to these things, I say, you know what, these things don't go away, do they? They just need consistent help.
They do. We should always have the aspiration of how do we solve issues? How do we eradicate common problems or challenges? Some of it is pretty fundamental in terms of getting kids to start strong early. So healthy babies, our focus around health and reducing infant mortality rates, which reduces or eliminates thousands of other potential issues around health. Helping kids get an early childhood education that is high quality so that they're ready for kindergarten. Helping families have supports on basic needs and those types of things. We know what it takes to help families survive and then thrive. And so you talk about the Haven and the success of that, a key United Way partner organization, both in terms of our education work as well as our basic needs work. We have the ability to dramatically improve conditions. We shouldn't look at it as, well, we're always going to have to do this. It's always going to take thousands of dollars every year. It's always going to take so many of us. And what's the impact? We're making a positive impact every generation in these families and these children's lives. Let's keep doing that. And at the same time, let's keep the aspiration high and the outcomes and the expectations high to say, so how do we get to the root cause of these issues and really reduce the overall need?
Mm-hmm. So it's possible then, if we take a look at a snapshot of someone who needs help today and try to identify what some of the root causes of that might have been as they were younger, and now we're trying to address those in young people today. So is it reasonable to expect that in 20 years from now, we may see the difference more than we do now?
Absolutely. And we should expect that. I mean, otherwise, I would say as leaders, we're not doing our job to say, how do we best understand these issues? How do we address, kind of common ways in which we can get at the support for these children and families? So there's interventions for the adults who may have struggled when they were younger. There's proactive interventions for the children of those adults to ensure that they have a successful track and moving forward. A lot of it, quite honestly, for me, comes down to education. My family lives here. This is personal for me. I have 3 kids, 7 grandkids. Their success is tied to everybody else's success in the community. So for me, this leadership role, the organization of United Way and its success directly impacts my personal family. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm excited to be a part of the organization that's helping my kids, grandkids, and everybody else's kids and grandkids.
A few more minutes with Chris Sargent, President, CEO of the United Way of the Battle Creek and Kalamazoo region. So we've been talking about philosophy here, I suppose, but the rubber meeting the road is the work that we often hear more about. That is to say, some of the specific efforts that have been underway to address those 4 areas. And
right.
And I think the big news this week was another corporate contributor, Consumers Energy, handed over a big check. This is part of this, not just individuals, but sometimes the employers get involved to try and encourage this.
Yeah, and get all their employees and their teams together. I mean, it builds kind of the team spirit of people contributing and giving back. It feels good to volunteer. It feels good to give back to something that's a greater good that's going to impact everybody in the community. And so, yeah, we're gearing up as a part of the annual fundraising campaign. We'll raise over $11 million across the region. And while it's a big number, it actually happens with 20,000 individuals giving $1 a week, $2 a week, $100, $500, whatever is meaningful to them. It happens with a few million in corporate gifts from over 350 companies, and it happens with thousands of volunteers going out into the community and volunteering in meaningful ways.
You talked about the $1, the $5. Very often when we're talking about giving that happens by way of your employer, these are payroll deductions that you can feel good about, but they happen almost without any pain at all, if any.
Right.
I mean, these things just come out of there like your direct deposit or something.
Yeah. And a couple of dollars a week makes a huge impact. Yeah. I mean, if you align it back to a couple weeks ago, I know we promoted it here, the Diaper Drive, where we were trying to raise over 50,000 diapers in the region, about half of which from Battle Creek. And we actually exceeded that number. We're now over 60,000. So we were really excited and very appreciative of how the community stepped up to do that. That's helping vulnerable children and families in the areas of health. So, somebody might say, well, what's the impact of that? Well, the impact is anybody can contribute, right? So you didn't have to give $2,000 to be considered a donor in that. You could do a pack of diapers, and that's how they came in. They came in with families saying, I've got a few extra, I can help, and they came in with bigger donations from companies who did big collection drives. But together, we raised over 60,000 diapers that we can get out to 47 local organizations across the region who said, I serve children that could benefit from this. I serve families who are struggling to decide on a daily basis, do I put dry diapers on my baby or do I buy formula? We're helping ease that stress and that burden for those families. And I haven't been in that position, to be fair. And so, but when you hear the stories of these families, you can appreciate and recognize these are working families who are struggling to decide between dry diapers on their baby or formula. What a tough decision.
Let that sink in a second. And in fact, we talked about that just in advance of the drive, which went over 5 days in June. And the points that were made were equally as impactful. I mean, as you said, a lot of us haven't been in that position, so we may not know that this stress exists. But I think one of the key points that was made when we talked about that was that the diaper stress for a parent is higher than whether or not they're going to eat.
Yeah.
And that's like a smack in the face that really wakes you up. Wow. So these kinds of things, when you start digging, trying to figure out what the needs are in the community, these things come up.
Right. And I think for the most part, when we hear about them as a community, we mobilize and say, well, we got to do something about that. Yep. And that's exactly what you saw in the generosity of us going, 20% over the goal of 50,000, which was a huge goal. I remember when we said, I was like, can we seriously achieve this? Everybody's like, absolutely. Because when people understand what's going on in the community in terms of issues and challenges, we live in one of the most generous regions in the country. People step up and participate. And that's what we see time and time again. So it's incumbent upon organizations like United Way to lead those efforts in partnership. We don't do anything individually or in isolation. In fact, we had, dozens of partners coming around the table to say we want to help organize this with you. We had a number of organizations that benefited, hundreds of families and children that are going to directly receive those types of donations, and thousands of people who contributed in some way, whether with product, whether with time, or whether with money. That's how United Way works successfully in a community to address big issues around education, income, health, and basic needs.
And it sounds like the perfect spot on which to leave it. And we'll stay in touch, of course.
Absolutely. ChangeTheStory.org if you want to find out more. Get engaged. We need people giving their time as well as their resources this year during the campaign.
ChangeTheStory.org. Chris Sargent, United Way, Battle Creek and Kalamazoo Region. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
We'll talk again soon.